Majora's Mask is perhaps the most controversial game in the entire Legend of Zelda series. Well, there's The Adventure of Link, but that's just because that game is impossible. Anyway, Majora's Mask contains many bizarre events and interactions that have left fans with countless questions and have led some to believe that the events of the game did not actually occur. I am one of those people, and no, I don't think that Link died either. Sorry MatPat, your theory was debunked long ago. It's almost common knowledge by now that the Hero of Twilight is a direct descendant of the Hero of Time. Unless 10-year-old Link spent some private time with Malon when he went to get Epona before embarking on his journey, this is impossible. And I don't think that could even physically happen either. But that's a really weird thought, so let's not focus on that. Throughout the course of this video, I will relay the evidence that proves that Termina is simultaneously both an alternative world to Hyrule and a construct of Link's mind. I'm your host Andy, and welcome to Zeldom. Fans have been theorizing about Majora's Mask since its release, but the debate regarding whether the events of the game are real or not became a popular subject following the release of the Dark Horse Books Zelda Encyclopedia. On page 36 reads the following: When a Skull Kid steals Majora's Mask from a traveling mask salesman, the combination of the Skull Kid's burdened heart and the evil magic within Majora's Mask transforms the world into the land of Termina. Termina is a parallel world with its own distinct culture, which is perhaps influenced by Majora's ancient tribe. This land is also inhabited by races and individuals similar to those found in Hyrule, which were constructed from the Skull Kid's memories and illusions. While many of the Hyrule's races, like Gorons and the Zora, are presented in Termina, the world feels different, twisted. Are you confused? If not, you should be, because this excerpt doesn't make much sense. It specifically states that Termina was created from the Skull Kid's memories and illusions, but it seems impossible for the Skull Kid to have memories of all the Hylians when the Skull Kids dwell in the Lost Woods. It also says that the Skull Kid actually did steal the mask from the Happy Mask Salesman, but the information found from the game implies that the mask originated from Termina. Based on this information, the Zelda Encyclopedia appears to be contradictory, so we can't take it to be completely true. Since the Zelda Encyclopedia and Hyrule Historia occasionally contradict themselves and make claims that aren't fully grounded, we don't consider them to be canon. Personally, I take information from them with a grain of salt, but I believe they do a decent job of portraying the stories fairly accurately. With that said, I only consider them as secondary sources for my theories rather than primary. However, we can't completely disregard the idea that Termina is all Skull Kid's dream, because there is another game where Link is known to have an adventure in someone else's dream, Link's Awakening. The game itself reveals that the entire plot was in fact the Windfish's dream, not Link's. Although there are still plenty of things that don't make sense in the Zelda Encyclopedia's claim, we shouldn't dismiss it entirely. But, after doing some extensive research, I've concocted a theory of my own that is both similar and completely different to the propositions made in the book. Like the encyclopedia claims, I believe Termina is not real, and that it was created from someone's memories and burdens. However, this someone is not the Skull Kid, it's Link. If this interests you so far, please take a short moment to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more theories like this one. The first and perhaps weakest point made to support Termina's reality is the fact that several characters seem to be aware of Link's journeys in Ocarina of Time, such as the Skull Kid, Happy Mask Salesman, and Gapora Gabora. This is not a good argument in favor of Termina's reality because if you look further into the details, it actually supports that it isn't real. First of all, the possibility that these events were just a creation from Link's memories is a quick and easy explanation for this. There's also no way that these characters could have knowledge of Link's journeys unless they exist beyond time, because at the end of Ocarina of Time, Link is returned back to the timeline before he ever drew the Master Sword, or even collected the other two spiritual stones. In other words, in the child timeline in which Majora's Mask occurs in, Link's journeys and struggles from nearly the entire plot of Ocarina of Time never happened. The only one that has memories of Link's journeys is Navi, who abandoned him immediately after being returned to the child timeline. Overall, it makes a lot more sense for Termina to be a distortion of Link's memories, rather than suggesting that all the aforementioned characters transcend the logic of time travel and conveniently know the way to travel between Hyrule and Termina. Now let's analyze the plot of Majora's Mask. If we search for a deeper meaning, we realize that the entirety of Majora's Mask, whether it was real or not, can be interpreted as an allegory. For those who don't already know, an allegory is either a story, image, or vision that must be interpreted to reveal a much deeper or hidden meaning. The first element I would like to analyze is the Skull Kid. When approaching the southern swamp, Link finds a drawing on a tree which initiates a cutscene narrated by Tattle. In this cutscene we see Tattle and Tail fly into a log to take shelter from the rain, but to their surprise they find a small child cowering in the fetal position, the Skull Kid. Later in the game it's revealed that the Skull Kid was suffering because he felt abandoned by his friends, the Four Giants. The Skull Kid is one of the main characters in the story of the game, and I'll even say that his role in the story focuses on one central element, the loneliness of a child. Does this sound familiar? When we look further into it, we realize the Skull Kid is a representation of Link. By analyzing Link's emotional state at the end of Ocarina of Time leading into the beginning of Majora's Mask, we can realize how loneliness, sadness, and grief must have filled his heart. He was returned to a time where the friends he had made during his quest no longer had any memories of him, and he was abandoned by his companion, Navi, who was the only one that remained that actually knew what Link had suffered through. In Majora's Mask, Andrew's grandmother tells Link of the Terminian legend of the Four Giants. In the story, it describes how the Giants and the Imp, who was implied to be the Skull Kid, were friends prior to the creation of the Four Worlds. But when the Giants left to watch over the Four Regions, the Imp asked, "Why must you leave? Why must you not stay? The childhood friend felt neglected." I believe that this part of the story is allegorical for Link when Navi left him. Link didn't know why Navi left him, so I'm sure he was asking in his own mind, "Navi, why must you leave? Why do you not stay?" and too felt neglected. Both he and the Skull Kid didn't understand why their closest friends had abandoned them and were left without anything that could lead them to healing, which could be a tie into the whole discussion about the Song of Healing, but I have an agenda here. While we're on the theme of loneliness, I wouldn't be doing this theory justice if I didn't discuss the inside of the moon. This is perhaps the most bizarre moment in any Zelda game. After the Giants stopped the moon from crashing into Termina, a beam of light emits straight down, like your cliché alien abduction scenes, and Majora's Mask flies directly into the moon. Link boldly jumps into the beam in pursuit of the mask and is transported to the inside of the moon. You would think that the inside of the moon would just be some dark caves or tunnels, right? No. Link is suddenly in the middle of a beautiful meadow with a large, lone tree in the middle. There's also a clear sky with the sun. How this is possible inside the moon, I have no idea. What's even more strange than this is the 5 masked children Link encounters in the meadow. 4 of them are running around the tree, each wearing the mask remains of one of the 4 bosses Link defeated. After Link interacts with these children, they each ask Link some philosophical and rather creepy questions, the most relevant for this discussion asking, "Your friends, what kind of people are they? I wonder, do these people think of you as a friend?" Not only are these questions flat out creepy, these children concede a much deeper meaning to the story of the game. The question, "Do those people think of you as a friend?" is a call to the Skull Kid's character in the story. I mentioned previously the legend of the Four Giants and how in Termina's lore the Skull Kid was friends with them since the ancient times, but when the Four Giants departed to watch over the 4 regions of Termina, the Skull Kid felt abandoned. Because he felt abandoned, the Skull Kid must have asked whether or not the Giants thought of him as a friend. If we recall my hypothesis that the Skull Kid's story in Majora's Mask is a representation of Link, and apply the transitive property, we can tell that Link must have also questioned if Navi was really his friend and why she left. This ties into the final child, who is cowering in the fetal position under the tree and wearing none other than Majora's Mask. When approached, he asks, "Everyone has gone away, haven't they?" clarifying this theme of loneliness. It's worth noting that there are many other significant quotes from the children on the moon, and there's many more details we can interpret, enough to make its own video, but for now I'm going to neglect them to stay on topic of this video. While journeying through Termina, we can see how many of its elements are based on Hyrule, but as the Zelda Encyclopedia puts it, everything is different and twisted. Once Link enters the moon, it becomes evident, as Ben Kenobi says,
"That's no moon."
It's apparent once Link enters the moon, he's experiencing a manifestation of someone's imagination who is trying to relay a message to him. I believe that someone is Link himself. Let me explain. At the very beginning of the game, even before Link is shown traveling through the Lost Woods, the narration text says that he embarked on a journey, a secret and personal journey. We obviously know from later in the narration that this personal journey was to search for Navi, but there's a hidden dual meaning of it. Throughout his adventures in Ocarina of Time, Link had to be a selfless hero and make many sacrifices to save Hyrule. During the plot, he discovered he was not a Kokiri, despite being raised as one, learned of his parents' fate, and then returned to a timeline where none of his actions even mattered. At that point, everything in Link's life was focused on saving Hyrule despite all his inner struggles. On the other hand, Link's adventures in Termina were all focused on understanding people and building relationships. In this game of side quests, Link listens to people's problems, learns who they are, and helps them. He travels to the Southern Swamp and back to Clocktown, to Snow Peak and back to Clocktown, etc., etc. He's constantly learning about his appointed departure, which is coincidentally his reoccurring destination. In Ocarina of Time, Link had to go discover and save the world, while in Majora's Mask, the focus is on Link's self-discovery and relationships with people. This coincidental allegorical structure of the Majora's Mask, in parallel with the ever-increasing bizarreness that climaxes with the Inside of the Moon events, suggests that this entire journey is all in Link's mind. I've already highlighted Link's pain and struggles that he must have experienced through Ocarina of Time and the events shortly after, so it's safe to assume he would have a high amount of stress. Very high amounts of stress are a common cause of what's known as vivid dreams, which are highly intense dreams that feel very real, contain some form of deeper meaning to the dreamer, and are typically remembered much easier. Since we have concluded that Link's adventure in Termina must have been a construct of his own mind, and he must have been tremendously stressed, we can conclude that Link was most likely on his journey that Zelda mentioned, then fell asleep and had the dream that was Majora's Mask. The more we delve into the allegory that is Majora's Mask, the more clear it becomes that the events aren't part of an actual adventure, but rather a vivid dream in which Link is on a journey of self-discovery. When Eiji Aonuma was asked in an interview about the reuse of Ocarina of Time's character models in Majora's Mask, he responded by saying they wanted those character models having the ability to express something they couldn't in the setting of Ocarina, because they had this very different image for the world where Majora's Mask takes place. You know, we described it as being a nearby land, but in feel, it's almost like another dimension. It's important to note that he said they had a very different image of the world Majora's Mask would take place, and that it feels like another dimension. This, in unison with the statement that the developers wanted the characters to provide deep expressions for Link, suggests that they had specifically intended for the game to be an allegory for Link rather than a literal adventure. However, the game case, manual, and even Hyrule Historia even state that Termina is a parallel world. This is an issue because the properties of the world of Termina are different from other, quote, parallel worlds of Hyrule, such as the Dark World and Lorule. In Lorule, everyone does have a Hylian counterpart, however they have vastly different personalities and appearances. In the Dark World, there are not any native inhabitants that correspond to the Hylians, only the geography is parallel to Hyrule. Both Lorule and the Dark World, aka Sacred Realm, are also called parallel worlds, but Termina is much different than both of these. The geography of Termina is vastly different from Hyrule, and most of its inhabitants are identical and live in a very similar context to their Hylian counterparts. Due to this, we can tell that Termina is not quite the same kind of parallel world as portrayed in other games. It's possible that this is a contradiction in the lore, however, I think we need to define what a parallel world or parallel universe actually is to figure this out. According to Dictionary.com, one of the several definitions of a parallel universe is a realm of existence and experience that is fundamentally different from the one that most humans share, a separate reality. Since it's highly possible for a dream world to be based on the realm of existence, in this case Hyrule's reality, but also distort all the details, which is the case of Termina, we can conclude by definition that Termina can be simultaneously both a dream world and a parallel world. This idea that the events of Majora's Mask were a dream is even supported through the inhabitants of Termina being slight distortions of their Hylian counterparts. What I mean by this is many of the characters in Termina are in a different setting, but still fill roles in a similar context from Ocarina of Time. The Gorman brothers work on a ranch and are antagonistic, which is based on Ingo from Ocarina of Time, who takes over the ranch from Talon. Link uses the Zora mask to transform into Mikau, who has a clear romantic relationship with Lulu. Lulu is the Terminian counterpart of Princess Ruto, who had an obvious romantic interest in Link. There's even Romani and Cremia, who collectively fill and add on to Malon's role in Ocarina of Time. In my first Link's Loves video, which you can find right here, I spent a noteworthy amount of time discussing the Romani sisters, how they are representations of Malon, and how they represent Link's romance with Malon. After this video, I highly recommend you go check that one out if you're interested in Zelda romances. Anyways, Romani is the counterpart for child Malon, while Cremia is identical to adult Malon. If Termina was a physical parallel world like Lorule in the Dark World, Cremia couldn't exist for two reasons. The first is that in Hyrule, there is only one Malon, so only one counterpart, Cremia or Romani, could exist. The second is that adult Malon doesn't exist yet in the child timeline, which is also why only Romani could exist. The fact that Cremia, a counterpart of adult Malon, does exist in Termina proves that Termina is formed from Link's memories. There's also a similar situation with Link the Goron. Link the Goron also appears in Majora's Mask, however, this would also be an issue if Termina was not a dream world because Link the Goron didn't exist at this point in the child timeline either. His only counterpart in Hyrule would be from Link's own memories of the future, which further supports the theory that Termina was all a dream. Let me go ahead and address some reasons why people believe Termina was real, other than nostalgia. I've seen some people point out that Link finds the Hero's Bow in the Woodfall Temple, which appears to be the same Hero's Bow that the Hero of Twilight later finds. People use this as proof because it implies that the Hero of Twilight's bow originated from Termina. When the Hero of Twilight obtains the Hero's Bow in the Goron Mines, the game text says, "You got the Hero's Bow. This Goron treasure once belonged to a hero of legend." It's true that the bow does resemble the one found in Termina. However, the Hero of Time was not a legendary figure in the child timeline, so assuming the Hero's Bow from Twilight Princess is from Termina is a huge oversight. What the vast majority of Zelda fans don't realize is that the legendary figure this bow belonged to was actually the first legendary hero from Skyward Sword. Here we can tell that by the design and the quote from Twilight Princess, that this bow dates all the way back to the first game in the Zelda timeline, not Majora's Mask. In fact, the same bow even appears on Wind Waker, which is in a separate timeline from Majora's Mask. We know that the events of the Wind Waker were real, and after thinking through all the timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff,
time travel!
I realized that since the bow appears in the Wind Waker, there's no way the bow in Termina could have been the same one. Possible explanations for the Hero's Bow in Termina could be because Termina is a parallel or dream world, and it's a counterpart of the Hylian Hero's Bow. The next element I want to acknowledge is the scene at the end of the game. In it, Link is shown riding Epona back through the Lost Woods with the mirror shield on his back, implying that Link returned to Hyrule with the equipment he obtained from Termina. At first glance, this does make it seem like Termina was real, but there's a large issue when we think about it. The way Link entered Termina was through falling down a hole inside a tree, followed by a weird acid trip experience. Even if these events were real, Link clearly would not have been able to return to Hyrule through the route he entered Termina. Unless we go off a limb and say Link found a portal between the worlds to get back to Termina, or the Skull Kid told them away outside their shown dialogue, this just doesn't make sense. If we recall the allegorical theme of learning about Link's point of departure, which is actually his destination, we can see that this cutscene further justifies that even these scenes from the Lost Woods were also a part of Link's dream. With that said, there are two moments in Majora's Mask that I believe were real. The first and obvious one is Link's memories of Zelda because it was confirmed at the end of Ocarina of Time. The second scene that I think was real may surprise you, and it's the final cutscene of the game. This moment is also set in the Lost Woods, and the camera slowly zooms in on a lonely stump that has a drawing on it. It's a detailed image that depicts Link and the Skull Kid holding hands, just as young kids do, with Tattle, Tail, and the giants behind them. Many believe that the Skull Kid drew this because it focuses on the Skull Kid with his friends, and it has a similar aesthetic to his drawing in the southern region of Termina. Due to this, it's interpreted as proof that Termina was real. However, the so-called evidence also has a fatal flaw. It's only valid if the drawing was actually drawn by the Skull Kid. Now at this point you're probably asking if I think that someone really drew this picture, who I think did if it wasn't the Skull Kid. My answer shouldn't be too surprising. It was Link. To begin with, the Skull Kid is implied to have stayed in Termina for the festival, so even if Termina was real, the Skull Kid couldn't have drawn this image in the Lost Woods at that time. Another important detail that hints that Link drew the picture on the stump is the drawing on Link's house in Kokiri Forest, which also has a similar style to the one shown at the end of Majora's Mask. Unless anybody wants to accuse the Skull Kid or somebody else of drawing on Link's house in the isolated Kokiri Forest, I think it's safe to assume it was a younger Link who drew a picture on his house about an adventure he had in a dream or something like that. Ultimately, I believe that the drawing shown in the Lost Woods was also drawn by Link. He likely was on the quest Zelda sent him out on, eventually ended up in the Lost Woods, and rested against the stump he found. Due to his distress and burdens caused from his journeys in Ocarina, he had a vivid dream in his sleep. His dream began where he actually was, the Lost Woods. and led him to the land of Termina, where he embarked on a journey of self-discovery. The dream ends with him arriving back in the Lost Woods and then waking up. Upon awakening, Link draws a picture about his dream on the stump he slumped against. Whether the young hero of time resumed his quest or returned home after this point, we may or may not be able to tell. But from what we discussed in this video, we can infer that from this dream he discovered the importance of his remaining relationships and how to heal his own sorrows. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you agree with my theory? Do you think Termina isn't real, but for other reasons? If you disagree with my conclusions, feel free to let me know what flaws you think I made. I'd love to continue discussing this topic, so I'll keep an eye out for your comments. If you enjoyed, please remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more theories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope to have you here next time.